You're listening to Drinks and a Movie with your host, Rudy. Spoiler alert.
All right, Drinks and a Movie podcast. Everyone, thanks for checking out this episode. I'm back with the great Becky Smith from the High West episode. Now we're going to be talking about a tequila, Casa Noble, which is another brand that you, I guess, represent would be the word.
Absolutely.
I'm super stoked to chat about this because tequila is something I've been trying to learn a lot more about lately. It's not completely in my wheelhouse, and I have a lot of friends that are interested as well because there's just a lot to talk about, and I think you'll fill me in with all the info. So, yeah, I'm not familiar with this brand. I know I've seen it before, but I haven't tried it yet. So, yeah, if you want to just...
Absolutely, and thanks for having me again. You're absolutely right. So I represent High West, but I also work for Constellation Brands, so a very large supplier. We do beer, wine, and spirits. And in the last few years, we've taken on more of a role for fine wine and luxury craft spirits, which brings us to Casa Noble. It's actually a brand that's been around since 1997. Our master tequilero, Jose Pepe Hermosillo, founded the brand back then. So we're hurtling towards 25 years. But you'll notice these beautiful, sexy decanter-style bottles almost look like perfume or cologne. But if you ever saw the brand, we used to be kind of a shorter, squatty bottle, but we still had those, those markers, those toppers that are metallic or metal, as well as our crest there, if you will, in the medallion. So last year we kind of went through a rebrand. Actually 2 years ago, went through a rebrand to really, reintroduce Casa Noble as the premium and luxury spirit, craft spirit that it really is, and not just a spirit, but tequila. I think, as we talked about, it is one of the fastest growing categories in spirits. Everybody wants to talk about whiskey and the complexity and all the subtypes of whiskey. Tequila and agave spirits, in my opinion, is just as complex, or it can be. So we'll kind of, I'll talk you through it. I know it's a whole, new world, and I'll try and not geek out too much. But like I told you, for me, agave is a little bit of a love language, so I get really, really excited and passionate. But Casa Noble in particular is one of my favorites. It's a really, really great, whether you're in the Blanco with no age, or you're moving up through the different expressions to an añejo or a blend of añejos and extra añejos, you really start to see different personalities as it starts to interact with the barrel, and you start to see those different layers. You see how the agave really plays with the barrel notes, much like you find in whiskey. So it's really, really exciting. Where do you want to start? I feel like we need to do a little taste to kind of kick it off.
I guess with the Blanco.
Let's do it with Blanco, yeah. So one of the cool things about Casa Noble is it is actually USDA as well as CCOF certified organic agave, as well as the process. So we get our agave from a single family estate up in the Highlands.
Thank you.
There you go. I'll do a little bit with you. So this is actually, when we say single family estate, so that is basically one agave plantation.
Okay.
That has been in the family for over seven generations. Cheers. Little different drinking tequila right now. But yeah, you can already, probably just right on the nose, you're going to notice how, really, really soft. I don't like to use the word sweet. Some people kind of, it's sweet or it's sour. I think that can be a little off-putting. But what I'd say is sometimes you get a little bit more citrus. Sometimes you'll get a little more floral notes, almost like a honey. But if you think of agave in its rawest form, when it's at peak maturity, it should be really, really soft and sweet, kind of like maple syrup, or, if you've ever had raw agave at the grocery store or at a market, or like honey. It's really, really soft, got a lot of different, flavor characteristics. This particular Blanco has no age. So I'll talk a little bit more about our process, how we keep it really true to tequila production roots through our process. But it comes right off the still and is bottled. So salud.
That's good.
As I say, you're nodding your head.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
I was going to say, like, even on the nose, it came through a lot. I feel like sometimes with Blanco tequilas, I have to like search a little more, but it has a lot of like depth, and I don't know if richness is the right word for the nose, but on the palate, it was really cool. That's the first thing. Just like you said, I wasn't expecting that, but it's got a really good balance of the like that sweet kind of. I know this isn't I probably have to be careful with this term, but almost that kind of vanilla-y flavor, right? Just a little bit, but with some of that like black pepper that I like to get too.
Yep. It almost has like, to me, it is just a beautiful balance, right? It's really light. It's not too, what is the word I'm looking for? It's not too rich or too round where you would think, oh, there's definitely artificial sweetener in here, right?
Yeah.
It's just got enough softness and enough of that agave sweetness to come through, but balanced with, it's still 40% alcohol. So it's got, it's got a nice little bite and pinch to it at the end. I think the same thing with the peppercorn.
Yeah.
And it's just, it has that nice, they really balance off of each other. I have to say, doing a blind taste testing with the Blanco, a lot of people tell me, oh, I don't do tequila.
Yeah,
I have bad memories, right? Like, hungover, or it just treated them poorly back in the day. So people stay away from it. I'm out here and I get really excited to do it because I'm like, let's line up a few different ones and let's see what you think. And I would say almost every time people have come to Casa Noble and been like, oh, that's really good. Like, what is that? And so then we talk about the process. We talk about how we harvest it, how we cook, how we ferment, how we distill, and then the barrel aging. And then when you find out more of those details, it's like, oh, holy cow, this is a really, really great spirit. The Blanco, of course, known. Most people are going to shoot it. You can sip on, this one, I can sip on it. I put like a little orange twist in there. I like to do it on a rock. But it's really great for cocktails too. It's honestly one of the best. You can do really cool things, not just your standard margarita or a Paloma, the things that traditionally we throw tequila in.
Right.
It's definitely got more complexity, and you can start swapping out some traditional recipes that you maybe use gin for. We're starting to see, swapping that out for mezcal. You can do the same with tequila. It just starts to, really once you pick up on those flavor profiles, kind of like build your cocktail from there. So some really, really fun things from Casa Noble. But back to who we are, I think some of the keywords I always go back to, apart from just premium, but is purposeful. This is a brand that it comes out of love. It comes out of passion and hard work. Pepe, our master tequilero, he is a 7th generation farmer, but also distiller. So this has been in the family for a long time. We actually distilled in Jalisco at a distillery called Cofradia. It's been making tequila since the late 1700s. So a really, really rich history down there, a beautiful facility. But some things that make us extra special at Casa Noble, it really stands out, amongst all the tequilas out there, and there's a lot. The U.S. is growing consumption like at a crazy high rate. So, more and more tequilas are coming onto the market, and agave spirits in general, honestly. But it all starts with the agave. I always take it back to almost terms of wine, where people are talking about, you always hear terroir and you hear about lot and things of that nature. When we talk about whiskey, sometimes people kind of forget the grain, because it does have to go through a conversion process and broken down. So most people would say when you're drinking, whiskey, they're not like, oh, this is from this region and from here, and it must have rained or didn't, all the agricultural aspects. But with tequila, you're actually, we're not really converting too much. It's already agave is essentially, sugar. It is a plant base, and it comes straight from the earth. So you have your highlands tequila and agave, and you have your lowlands. To be a tequila, you have to be Blue Weber agave. So that's a very specific type of agave species. I think there's over 200, maybe even 300 different species of agave. But in order to be called a tequila under Mexican rule, it does have to be 100% Blue Weber. So that already makes it a little more nuanced.
And that's one of those kind of key differences between it and mezcal then, right? Because it's like a Blue Weber is not the same as like an Espadín or a Pechuga or all the other. There's a ton of them.
Exactly.
Okay. But within the Blue Weber itself, there's a ton of different varieties of like that one as well.
It is its own variety.
Okay.
So Blue Weber is its own, or you sometimes just see it as Blue Agave.
Yeah.
That is its own specific type. Like you said with mezcal, you have Espadín, every village actually. So mezcal is actually less regulatory as far as where it can be produced, like in the types of agave. I think the saying in the industry is all tequilas are mezcal, not all
Right.
mezcals are tequilas,
Yeah.
because you do have a little fluctuation in the agave species itself that you can use. But when we're talking about actual tequila, I'm not talking about mixtos, I'm not talking about some of the golds, and there's blends, because you can still produce tequila at 51% agave, and you can mix the remaining 49% however you'd like. But truly, traditionally, to be labeled tequila is 100% blue agave. And so that's in case for us, that's absolutely what we use. And it's certified organic. So, obviously a big buzzword, and we talk about organic and sustainability and being environmentally conscious. That is really important to us, Constellation as a company, but specifically at Casa Noble. So no additives have ever touched that agave plantation. That farm has been, cared for carefully, manually harvested. Even when we're going through and we're selecting our agave, we don't use any machinery. So we have individuals, humidors, that are out there checking the agave plants daily, testing the sugar and the water levels. How old do you think agave has to be before it's Blue Weber agave before it's mature?
I'm going to guess around 6 years.
Those are rookie numbers. Got to
okay.
pump them up.
12?
A little bit closer. So anywhere from 10 to 12 years is the average. So it's funny that you say 6 years, because industry standard, a lot of more commercial production, they're obviously, trying to crank stuff out.
Right.
So they're actually harvesting at a younger, when it's not fully mature. So we're waiting until that, that agave plant is ready to go. So that's peak sugar levels. And it's basically that balance of sugar, water levels, and sweetness, really making sure. I always say, like, going to the grocery store and trying to find the ripe avocado. You don't want it a few days early, and you don't want it a few days late, if you're ready to eat. So that's kind of the process there too. So from there, when it's already in that, fully matured state too, that's where you're going to soak up all that terroir. So everything that it's been experiencing for the last 10, 11, 12 years, you're going to pick up in its rawest form. And that's really where we want to keep intact. So through the cooking process, through the fermentation, through the distillation, even the barrel aging, our goal at Casa Noble is not to overpower that. It's really to enhance and showcase that agave and how beautiful it can be. So once we go and we harvest, we actually take, I'm going to give you a lot of terms, since we said we're kind of new in introducing the world of agave spirits to the podcast here. So basically, once they take the koa, which is, that blade almost looks like a shovel, but it's flat. So we take that off, we cut off the agave spears. So that's the, obviously in the succulent plant. We take that off and we're left with what's called a piña.
Yeah.
Looks like a pineapple. Some people call it a cabeza because it looks like a head.
Okay.
But it essentially looks kind of like a chopped down pineapple a little bit. So we take all of those. Some of them are pretty large. I mean, agave, the Blue Weber agave can grow up to like 6 feet to 8 feet. So they're pretty big. You're not thinking like little, you're not thinking like little bitty succulents, you find at, a nursery or something. These are really large plants. So the cabeza itself, or the piña, is very large. So we're taking all of that. And then the next step is you want to cook it, because right now it's basically as hard as this table. It's like wood. It's very fibrous. So you do have to kind of cook that down to expel the agave out of there, to get that juice out. So basically the traditional method is with a hornos. It's a brick oven. I liken it to like a pizza oven, if you will, but you can kind of walk in. It's much larger.
Right.
But it's really, really hot, and it's stone or it's brick. So you're already going to have a lot of flavor profiles that come out of that. You think of grilling, versus a gas grill versus like a charcoal or a brick, I guess a charcoal grill, yeah. Taking back my childhood in the South. But, it imparts a different flavor versus if you had like an autoclave, which is like a stainless steel, pressure cooker.
Right.
You're not going to get, when you steam them, you're not going to get some flavor, as much flavor there. It's really not its job. It's really more about efficiency and really cooking down those piñas a lot quicker, so you can extract it and you can move on to the next step. So I'm telling you all this because it all takes time, right? It's manually harvested. We're waiting already on maturity. Then it's a slow cook. So our cooking process is a little bit longer. We just want to make sure that they're cooked down and at a low and slow temperature. The next step really is, once that's softened, that's ready, is you got to extract the agave. So our next step is Typically, you call it a tahona. So that stone, if you've seen it, traditionally it was pulled around by a donkey or a mule. Now, there's more modern apparatus where it kind of goes around, but it's the same kind of process. This is where in the industry, it gets really, really like sticky. I'm sure you've heard of a diffuser method. So it's basically a new multi-million dollar, newer commercial extraction, essentially machine. A lot of commercial brands are switching over to it because again, it's very, very efficient. Essentially you can extract, the juice out of it, the agave. But what happens is, unlike the crushing method, you're just kind of, you can start to taste a diffuser. Let me just put it that way, because what happens is as you extract, you're also pulling away a lot of the flavor compounds and the flavonoids that you need, that make agave so special. And so what's happening is 9 times out of 10, if they're using a diffuser, they're having to add something back in to kind of put those flavors that you're looking for. And so you start to mess with different chemicals like glycerin, different compounds that really are not natural. They're not healthy for you. Again, I say all this with a grain of salt. We are talking about alcohol, but you know what I mean? So when you go more of an authentic method where you're either crushing, or for us at Casa Noble, we actually squeeze the piñas. So I like to say we give them some TLC, and we're extracting that in a very gentle method. Because like I said, the piña is really hard. You think of like, if you're cooking this and you get off, some of these fibers, they're really bitter and really tough. That's not going to bode well in your agave. Right. That's kind of counterproductive of what you're trying to do. So what we like to do is really massage and squeeze it out, because even with crushing, sometimes you get some of those fibers put back in. So for us, it's a very gentle process. Again, it's very methodical, very purposeful, and that's really going to bring us, once you have that juice and it's ready to ferment, that's the next step. Fermentation, again, you have to have, your agave, and then you have to have yeast to kind of let it jumpstart. We use a natural yeast strain, so there's no additives. We're not taking other strains. It's very natural. We actually do an open vat fermentation system. So in our stainless steel fermentation vats, we leave the tops open. So down at Cofradia, it is a beautiful property, and we actually have citrus gardens, and we have hibiscus and florals. So we have all this native agriculture on the property. And I think of it kind of like, we're here in California, a lot of open air spots. It's the same thing. You get a nice breeze. You're going to get, as things pollinate and bees are buzzing around, different cycles, you're going to get a lot of those notes into the fermentation vat. It's going to mix with the agave to give it even more. That's why he's like, you might pick up on a little citrus notes, a little floral. All of that goes into our fermentation process, which takes us a few days because we're not closing the top. It's not being fueled with CO2. So we're doing a very clean fermentation, a very natural process. So you think, again, at this point, all we have is organic agave, and we have natural yeast, and then we move on to distillation. So we actually triple distill our tequila. Most only do a double distillation. We really run it through that third run as a filtration more than anything. And then it's ready to be bottled. So here, across the course of all this, a lot of people can do distillation as low as 6 hours, can do full runs. For us, it's about a 12-hour process. Again, I just keep going back to it's very, very methodical, very authentic. Everything we do starts with out in the agave plantations, and just through our distillation takes us a little bit of a while, which is why I would still say we're craft. We are not one of the big, pumping out millions, hundreds of millions, I should say. But it's just, that's how dedicated to the craft that we are. I would say that's Pepe. That's his lifelong passion. His family's passion is to keep it very authentic. I have to, celebrate Pepe and his leadership down at the distillery, because he's actually one of the pioneers and the leaders for tequila production, making it, working with the Mexican government to make it regulate that you can and cannot do these certain things, and really streamline and keep the authenticity of tequila production as it was hundreds of years ago. Right. So that brings us, to the next thing that I really applaud Pepe for is currently Casa Noble, we have a Blanco, a Reposado, and an Añejo. We also just released this past late summer, early fall, Marquez de Casa Noble, which is a blend of Añejos and extra Añejos. So it's a limited release, the first time we've actually ever launched that, which is super exciting. But for anybody that's a fan of Casa Noble, has been following us for years, knows that we used to do some barrel selects and things of that nature. You probably hear barrel select and you think automatically bourbon and whiskey. Mm-hmm. We were actually one of the first, and Pepe kind of pioneered the movement to barrel age tequila and do these unique finishes, which is really exciting. A lot of people don't think, again, they think of bad college tequila right. And doing shots, and they don't think about the artistry that goes into tequila production. They don't think about the complexity that comes from the agave plant and all the notes, what you can do with it. Also with tequila, you just have to finish it in oak. So when we come to the reposado, which means rusted, we actually select and work with French white oak. So these are new oak come out of, for our repo and our añejo, come out of the Bordeaux and Cognac region of France. So you think about American oak versus French white oak. It's just a lot softer. The pores on that tree, it's not very overpowering. So a lot of tequilas are aged in American oak. And sometimes it can overpower with the vanilla, with the caramel, the spice notes. Right. And some people will be like, oh, I don't really prefer, a reposado or even an añejo with more age on it. It's kind of too much. But if you also think about it, we've talked about cutting, I don't want to say cutting corners, but, expediting the tequila production process. You've already got less mature agave, which maybe is a little more tart, and maybe have, if it's crushed or diffused, you're already changing the flavor profile there. And then possibly adding in some additives. You're doing a double distillate with, a fermentation process that maybe wasn't completely natural. So you think about all those notes, and now you're putting in a barrel that has a really strong personality. And if it's rested for too long, it's going to take over. You're not going to taste the agave. You're really going to be drinking a barrel. Right. So for us, I really, really love that we're one of the few in the industry that actually have that use French oak. So you'll see when we move on to the reposado, the añejo, our reposado is actually aged for 364 days. So to be a reposado, you need a minimum of 2 months in wood. For average industry standards, probably like 4 to 6 months is what you'll find. Mm-hmm. But for us, we take it right up to that precipice. If it's at 1 year or older, it becomes an añejo. So for us, we take it just 1 day shy. I like to say like pushing those limits, and you can really see the reposado to me is a beautiful display of the smoothness of the Blanco. Mm-hmm. all the wonderful notes we kind of started off with. And then you see its interaction with the barrel. And that's when it starts to take on a little more of the vanilla, the caramel, but with beautiful spice notes. I think to me, it's as you move through the progression of each expression, it's just even more unique, more complex. And you see how our Blanco here started off just, as is, essentially just showcasing this beautiful agave and the production there. And then, you have a little bit of age, and then we add a little bit more age. And then as we move over to Marquez, that one's even more special. I'll talk a little bit more as we get over there, but you ready to pop over to the repo? So like I said, it's called reposado because in Spanish it means rested. So typically, it's rested from anywhere, a minimum of 2 up to a year. Typically don't get a lot of... if they're on the younger side, a lot of people are still getting, some of the bite from their Blanco. And if the Blanco wasn't done, I would say in a loving way, you're going to start to pick up on where the spirit breaks down, right? I didn't pour any, but I'm going to continue to sip this Blanco.
It definitely has a longer finish, and I get the sweetness on more on the finish side of it. It seems like less of that pepperiness, maybe like a little softer.
Yeah.
There's like something else. I just can't put my finger on it that happens like right at the front, but
Well, and I'm also going to pour you the añejo, which is aged 2 years in the French white oak. So you can kind of see, while you have a little bit of reposado left, I'm curious how you take in the añejo.
This the añejo right here?
So you're already going to see a little bit difference in color, of course, a little extra age on the barrel, about a year to be exact. But it's funny. I get some people that really love the repo, like that's more their go-to.
Yeah.
And they're like, the añejo is beautiful, but I'm a reposado person. And then on the flip side, you have people that really connect with the añejo. They love the softness of it. It's almost like chocolate notes start to come out, but not in like not in like a sweet way or like an artificial way at all. Just a very smooth, very elegant but complex spirit.
I see what you mean with that kind of chocolate note, like a darker chocolate, but
or even like a cocoa powder, I'd say, like not like milk chocolate.
Yeah, like the darker,
like a
more,
richer, but like good subtle notes.
It's almost like a little more savory to me though, like on the back end. Is that like more? I don't want to say like salty, but savory. I think that's the best way I can put it. Yeah. And good. Each one though, I don't know if it's just me or if this is typical, but I feel like the nose was very strong, like on the Blanco in like the best way. And then each one, I feel like I get a little less and less. I don't know if I'm just like warming up now or what, but.
Your palate's just accepting of it now. Yeah. No, I would agree. I think I think with the Blanco, you have nothing to cover it up, right? It is just the agave that's been fermented and distilled and right into the bottle. So it is going to be a bit brighter. Mm-hmm. It's a new make spirit, so it's going to be younger. It's going to be brighter, and I think you're right. I think that tends to shine through a little bit more as you go to the reposado. You move through the añejo. They just take on, I say softer because it has that barrel, the barrel aging in it. So you start to get, I think where the spice, and that savoriness that you mentioned, it's more it is reserved on the palate. Mm-hmm. So it's more inviting, if you will, because I think sometimes with the Blanco, you can still smell because it is young, it is bright. You can smell like, oh, that is tequila. Like that's still, that is still 40% alcohol. Whereas with the reposado and añejo, I think you're right. It gets a little more subtle. And then when you take in the palate, you're like, oh, there it is. And that's why I really like doing them side by side, because it's fun to see how it expresses itself.
Yeah.
Even when you go back, I'd be curious to see if you went back to the Blanco.
I was actually going to ask if I could have a little splash again.
Do a little.
Yeah. Because I'm almost wondering if for me right now, just based on my memory of first having this, if I'm going to maybe like this one a little more, to be honest. Yeah, I like them.
Where are you landing at? With tequila, what do you usually drink?
I really like Fortaleza, and definitely the Repo, and the winter blend. Oh, that's like
the coveted winter blend. Yes,
and I like the still strength too. I was really into Casa Dragonas for a minute, and I turned a lot of my friends onto that one, but then I realized as I tried more. Oh, La Gratona is another really good one. As I tried more, I was like, man, this one's almost like too smooth in a way. And I don't know, maybe I got to be careful about talking brands. But then I learned that one used with one of those newer methods. And I was like, oh, shit. No wonder that explains it.
And one of the craziest things, I can't sit here and say I've been in the industry so long, but even in my time in the industry, the brands that have risen in popularity and that you see more commonly started out as craft brands, and they were really fighting, almost like what we're doing with Casa Noble is no, there is a real way to enjoy tequila. And I think that's what, thank goodness, the industry is really celebrating, is moving away from brands that maybe started out very authentically, but due to demand and popularity, they've modified, they've sold off, or they've changed how they produce. And I have to say that's one thing with us at Constellation that I'm so proud of. As people hear, a big powerhouse company comes in and, oh, they're going to destroy that brand. Oh, that was so good. I've heard that so many times, with High West or with Casa Noble. And it's just not the truth.
Yeah.
It's like I can sit here and say, like I said, I appreciate a lot of these great brands out there too, but I would say that we're allowing, at Constellation, we want to celebrate these craft spirits. We want the makers. We want their team. Pepe is still very much at the helm and is leading this brand. We're just kind of giving him the juice to and a platform to really educate consumers, educate people in the industry of these are the do's and don'ts, right?
Yeah.
And really, that's what it comes down to. I'd never sit here and shame someone for what they're ordering it, but it's almost like, we're going back to food, and we've seen this whole shift in how we view our food and where it's coming from, how it's made, being fair, giving back to the environment. And if those are things that are important to you, if you want to know that what you're drinking and putting in your body, very important to keep it clean, to keep it additive free. And it's great to note that you can do all that stuff. You don't have to put additives back in. It's you can still have a wonderful spirit that is safe, and is fully transparent about what you're consuming. To have those mark of approvals, to be USDA as well as CCOF certified organic agave is a really proud moment for us. And we continue. So we actually are working towards a no waste, policy essentially at Cofradia and with Casa Noble. So we actually make our own compost. So anything that isn't getting used in the process, we're actually putting it back into the agave plantation in the fields to help culture, the next, new growth, and what will soon become tequila and, a couple of years. So it's a really cool process for us, sustainability and being environmentally conscious. And it's nice to have an award-winning tequila, to kind of put the feather in the cap there and see all our hard work is being celebrated. And I just have to go back to our team that redesigned this packaging and this bottle. Rudy, you should go in the market and see if you can find an older bottle of Casa Noble and put them next to each other. And it's I appreciate what it was when it launched, and that was kind of the vibe back then in the late 90s. But to see this evolution of the brand, to remind people we are still here, we're still producing a beautiful, beautiful spirit, and now coming out with some new stuff. I think that was one of the biggest things is when's the barrel program coming back? When are we getting more of these? For people who've been a follower of Casa Noble, they know all about Pepe's mad scientist. His, that's what I call them. It really is. It's their passion projects, labor of love, and flexing their skills as distillers, as finishers and blenders. And I think that's where Marquez comes from. So if I'm not mistaken, Pepe's been working on this this particular blend for close to a decade. He had a profile of exactly how he wanted this to taste, how he wanted it to look and feel. And finally, he was like, this is it. So for Marquez de Casa Noble, it's a blend of 21 añejos and extra añejos. So aged from 1 to 5 years is kind of that sweet spot. Don't have percentages for you, but that it is a blend in there. And then it actually, as we were talking about the French oak for the reposado and the añejo, we actually turned this up just a little bit more to make it extra sophisticated and extra special. Pepe went back to France, and he walked through with the cooperage to hand select the trees that were going to be used. And they come from the Atelier region. So he actually hand selected each tree that he wanted to use for the barrels. Once they cut down those trees, they actually rested them on the forest floor for 2 years. So again, we go back to the agave being an expression of the earth and its, its terroir and where it's from, and highlighting that. We're now doing that with the wood as well. It's soaking up anything that happened in those 2 years. It's soaking up all the elements before they're dried off, conditioned, and sent to the cooperage to be built into a barrel for the aging process. So then we're blended, and we are left with this beautifully unique spirit that comes in, I have to say, one of the more beautiful bottles I've seen, mirrored after an agave spear. So if you want to do the honors, since it's closer to you,
making sure we can see it.
Yeah, so we actually, this is a limited production, hit Southern California, I would say late August, early September of 2022. And we still, I'm finding it in some bottle shops, definitely
Sorry.
Opa! Definitely finding it around town, more craft, I would say, places and bars as, we're, again, sure. Thank you. As we're just, introducing people, we're introducing Casa Noble, I think, to a new style of consumer, and people who are enjoying tequila maybe have just gotten into it in the last year or two. They've never heard of us. They're like, oh my gosh, this is an amazing new brand. And I laugh because I'm like, we've actually been around for a while. But it's really exciting to connect with followers of the brand for years. And now, with this new product showing that, we have a prowess in blending as well. Our team is more than capable of hanging with, I would say, quote, the big boys. I like to think we are, because our juice is just that damn good. But anyways, what do you think so far on the nose?
The nose really shot out this time, and almost right off the bat kind of had a fruitier vibe to me. And now it seems like it's softening up into what I typically know of.
And then
tequila.
also, I would just point out the color. It's like a nice hybrid between the Reposado and the Añejo a little bit. Mm-hmm. It's hard to tell because the bottle obviously has a pewter amber color. Yeah. But you can really see just a nice, it's a mix between a pale straw and almost the amber color. What kind of fruit were you picking up on? You think a darker fruit or kind of?
Just something red, like a red berry.
Cherries and dark fruit kind of?
Yeah, something like that.
I think a lot of times those notes are reserved for a bourbon. People start to, or darker spirits. So it's nice for me to hear that in the world of tequila.
I can't pick anything out. It's good, but I can't decipher anything. It's definitely different. It just feels. Mm-hmm. The mouth feel, I mean, the sound all whatever, but the mouth feel, it literally feels a lot different than the other ones did.
I agree. And I think that's why, it is different, but I think the finish on this for me is what really sets it apart. Is you can nitpick, the flavor profile and extract all the different notes that you want. To me, I think it's delicious, just like it's, siblings, if you will. But I think the finish on this is really elegant, really long. And because it is so long, you can start to pull apart some of the complex layers that, again, most people don't associate with tequila. Yeah. And I think that's why this is a beautiful product to showcase what you can do with agave, and how there are unique factors at play, and you can build a beautifully complex spirit that is really easy to drink. Sometimes too easy.
Yeah. No, that on the second taster, I definitely got more of that long finish, and it reminds me. It is reminding me a little more of a well-aged bourbon, to be honest. The way it finishes and the kind of flavors I'm getting. It's clearly still tequila. I'm not saying it tastes like something it's not. But so, I guess to go through the stats again, it's a blend of 1 to 5 year old añejos, just a ton of different ones, you said, right?
So it's añejos and extra añejos.
And
so you got 9 añejos and 12 extra añejos to bring the total to 21.
Yeah, that's a lot.
And they're, right? Then, could you imagine taking all the flavor profiles and being I need a little bit of this and that, but aged 1 to 5 years. And then the extra cool thing on the aging process for it was the barrels that was used.
2 years of
we're taking that new French white oak from an even different region than we typically source from, and then it's resting for 2 years before it even becomes a barrel.
One thing I'm really liking about this, and I mentioned this when we were doing the Midwinter Nights Dram, is I love a spirit that I feel evolves with the amount of time I just have it in my hand. Now going back to the nose, there's a lot more a spice quality. It feels completely different than it did the first time. It went through spiciness. Now it's almost more sweet again, but more of that creamy, chocolatey, vanilla type sweet.
And I think that's the fun thing is, you revisit these spirits and it continues to reveal more of itself to you. What you thought you picked up the first sip or two tastes completely different, and even if you put a little bit of water in there, or you put it, you serve this over ice, it's going to start to even taste a little bit different. I think that's, for me, it's funny. That's why I like to, you shouldn't be tasting alone. That's just rude, right? And bad company. But more than anything, it's nice to, for me to come and revisit, even though I'm very familiar and well-versed, it's nice for me to come back and be like, what is my palate picking up today? Is there something new that I haven't experienced before? And then sometimes, hearing your perspective on it, it's completely different. We talked about this with Midwinters is, it reveals itself differently to everybody, or can. So it's always really nice to hear how it speaks to you and how you ultimately connect with it.
I dare say that it's for anybody who's into whiskey, or I'll say whether it be like bourbon or rye, and you're like not sure about tequila, I think this is like a really excellent segue into that. Like maybe you're starting like too much at the top to like go to this.
I love it. You're like go right in
up.
for the premium, like absolutely.
But this is really great. Like I haven't had one like this. This is really good.
It's funny you say that. I was actually a few months ago at an event and pouring Casa Noble, and we had just released Marquez, and I had a gentleman that came up to me and he was like, "Where can I buy this?" He loved the Marquez and the Añejo, and he's like, I drink whiskey. I don't drink tequila. That's just not my thing. And he said, but this is really, really good. This is really smooth. And he kind of said the same thing. Like if you're trying to, make a connection or bridge that, to other spirits and understanding it, that's, it has a lot of similarities and personality characteristics of a whiskey, or even I would honestly say probably more of a bourbon because of the corn, right? Because of that like lighter, sweeter, more vanilla profile. But yeah,
it's so spicy. Like every time it's different now. And I said, I think for the rye, for me, just sometimes on the nose, like definitely more of the bourbon on the taste. But sorry, I interrupted you.
Oh my gosh, you're fine. That's what this is meant to be, like communally shared and enjoyed. It's so funny. Sometimes with the Blanco, I pick up more like the citrus, and then other times it's that spicy, that peppercorn, and I'm like, oh, there it is. So it's always fun for me, and not just with our brand, but trying spirits in general is, how does it compare? What am I picking up on? I think that's when people get bogged down in like, what's the best, and you go to lists, and those are nice accolades. Don't get me wrong. As a brand, when we get named something, it's like, ooh, yay. But it ultimately comes down to you. What is your palate telling you? What are you connecting? I keep going back to connect because it is. I might talk about it in a very like philosophical, like, passionate way, but it really is at the end of the day, what are you enjoying about it? And if you really enjoy the Blanco, then that's amazing. And I appreciate that. Like I said, I appreciate all of these spirits. They are all beautiful. And it's like, sometimes I'm thinking more, I want a little Marquez or the Añejo. I would go 9 times out of 10, I'm reaching for the Repo. And that goes with most of my agave spirits. I'm ordering a Reposado. But when you have also a Blanco that drinks like this, you can't go wrong either. So they are all meticulously and beautifully made to really hit different price points and to hit a little bit different flavor profile depending on what you're looking for.
Yeah, I think of this lineup, the Blanco and Marquez are probably my favorite. I feel like I'm usually, if I'm going to sip tequila, I go for the Repos too. I'd have to try them all again because it always depends on the day too.
Right? Tough work. We just have to revisit. It's fine.
But are these, I know I've seen Casa Noble before. Like it's pretty widely available, right?
Yeah, it is. I think like a lot of tequila producers, we were not immune to inventory issues, bottling. With COVID, I would think out of any spirit industry, agave was hit the hardest because of, especially for producers like us that do everything by hand and it's
Right.
manual. We're not using big machinery. That it's it's a team of humidors going out into the fields. They were, people were getting sick, or you're having to play it safe. Then you go into the cooking process. Every step it's a lot of labor. And so a couple years ago, we definitely ran into some inventory issues. I think I wasn't part of the company then, but from my understanding is it kind of gave us a moment to kind of step back and how can we survive this as a brand, as a company. And I think it was a perfect time. I think it was a perfect time in agave consumption and education. It was a perfect time as far as the whole world was slowing down a little bit, as far as let's roll out a new packaging. Let's relaunch this celebrated spirit. Let's remind people who we are and what we have to offer. And that's really the angle I come at it is. There's a lot of history here. There's a lot of history with the distiller. There's a lot of history with the individuals like Pepe and his family. But it's really exciting to kind of retell or reintroduce this amazing spirit and this amazing brand and all the hard work that we're doing to, like I said, a new demographic. So we are finding it it's funny for me sometimes walking into places and they have the old packaging and they're like, I didn't even know. And to see people get so excited over this decanter.
Yeah,
I mean, I can't lie. Like seeing it on a back bar, even on on like a bottle shop on a shelf, it really does stand out, which is nice. But a lot of people are moving for that premium spirit, right? They don't mind spending the money on something that they know is authentic. It is, and it's delicious. So that's really, also the direction that we wanted to move is that's who we are. We are small, and we're small but mighty, I like to say, but there's a lot of craftsmanship that goes into Casa Noble, and that's the biggest thing that I'm trying to share with everybody. So definitely, especially in Southern California, where we love agave out here, and I like to say it's summertime year round. So you're thinking a lot of people are drinking margaritas and very summery drinks, even in the wintertime, even when we're not battling tsunamis and monsoons. It's finding its way on a lot of back bars and into a lot of shops here locally in its new form and its new iteration, which is super exciting.
And is the Marquez isn't like a limited, I don't know if I'm just thinking like whiskey right now, but it's not a limited release, is it?
It is.
Okay,
So you're absolutely right in
so I
thinking
need
of
to get
terms
one
of, yeah.
ASAP.
So we, like I said, there are still, here in Southern California, still some availability. Know a few places that have it. But if I'm not mistaken, I think the rumor mill says we might be doing a second wave, a second release, but nothing official as of yet. So whatever you see out is out. They came in 3-packs, so even more limited.
Yeah.
For different accounts to bring in. But hopefully if we're spreading the tequila gospel, as I like to say, one sip at a time, you're going to start to grow a nice fandom or regrow the fandom. Southern California actually was a huge Casa Noble supporter. It was, kind of from what I've been told, it was everywhere in a sense. And then, we're reintroducing. And that's where I'm at, is like resharing this brand and educating and reminding people it looks a little different, but and we made just a couple of tweaks, but for the most part, our juice is still intact, and we're bigger and better than ever.
Nice.
Yeah.
I guess one thing before we start to wrap it up, just in terms of like tequila knowledge and what to look for. So I remember learning like several years ago, like you want to look for 100%, blue agave on the label for sure. But even with that label, that doesn't necessarily mean that there's not a lot of stuff being added to it, like you said before, right?
Right.
Like, so it still can like not be 100% legit.
And so one of the best like cheats, if you will, or if you're wanting to learn more, is to actually look on the bottle and look for the NOM. So the NOM number for us, it's on the back of the bottle, and it says NOM 1137. A lot of them, it depends on the brand, but you will have it. you'll have it on the front, but it has to be posted on the bottle. So you can just actually pop into a search engine and type in the nom, and it will actually, there are sites out there. There's one in particular, Tequila Matchmaker, that I think has an incredibly comprehensive list. Again, it doesn't tell you the whole story, but it tells you a good chunk. They've done a lot of research and legwork, but it tells you the distillery, if there's a history of the distillery, the brands they currently produce, brands they used to produce, because you can also, there can be switches and change distilleries, change distillers. And so it will also tell you kind of, if they have a diffuser, if they use a Tahona, if they use an enclave, like yes, I was like autoclave. There we go. It's like an enclave, an autoclave versus the Hornos, et cetera, et cetera. So you can kind of start to see. I think the big thing right now, it's kind of is a diffuser, because a lot, unfortunately, with the diffuser, and I can appreciate the efficiency and the commercialization of trying to extract it, make it a little bit quicker. However, if we're looking for flavor and authenticity, most likely you're going to have to add in something. So that's kind of the big thing is, and they're working. I know there's a lot of people in the industry that are working to outlaw that, to keep agave in general, to keep these different spirits that come from it very protected. But the U.S., we're the guilty ones. We love tequila. We are loving agave. We've seen such a spike in mezcal as well. There are several other spirits that are actually made from agave, and not just in the regions that produce tequila. So there's 5 states in Mexico that are allowed to produce tequila. So you have a whole world outside of that. And like I already said, 200, maybe 300 different species of agave. Yeah. So my prediction is we're going to continue to grow, and we're going to continue to see it. For us, it's being responsible and being good stewards of, I love Casa Noble, but for me, it's being very protective of this in general, of tequila production, really agave spirits production. Is I don't want to see it fall away of become too commercialized, because there's so much rich history. It is so wrapped up in Mexican culture, and I want to keep continuing to celebrate that and celebrate the people who have worked very hard for years and years to build that up and to continue those legacies. So for me, it's really keeping the history of it intact and keeping the processes authentic. So that's my 2 cents on it. But it's really exciting. Like I said, I start to get so passionate about it. I just think, I have an appreciation for all spirits, but agave, to know firsthand, see people hardworking, seeing like how, this is backbreaking work. It's not easy. You can't just, throw on a machine and let it go. It is very tedious and time consuming, and people have really poured their lives, work into this, that I think that's something, very much to be celebrated. And it has very much its own place, and it's nice to see that people appreciate it, versus 10 years ago, 15 years ago, it was beer and a shot, or, I've been guilty of that too, and sometimes I still am, but it's just nice to see the craft be recognized now and appreciated on a mainstream level, not just for some of us, spirit nerds.
No, that's something, to me, it's definitely, I think the big importance is the history and knowing that there's a lot that's been passed down for literally centuries and families, and that you still have like someone's grandfather out there, just doing it solo at times, and like super old school. Like I really appreciate that, and like the cultural and historical significance. So I know that's why I'm like especially into learning about, tequila and mezcal. And this is a really great brand. And like for someone who hasn't had it before now, I'm very grateful that you brought these and shared these. Like I have to find this immediately.
He's like turning right to the search engine, like Marquez.
I know exactly which stores I'm gonna hit.
Yeah, there you go. Awesome. If we are missing all the Marquez in Southern California, we blame Rudy. Got it. No, I'm really glad that we had a chance to talk about agave. I know you do a lot of whiskey, so it's nice to explore, these other genres and other categories, and honestly compare, how similar They are. I've had quite a few añejos, more so extra añejo, just because of that age, that age jump, where you drink it and you're like, oh, that's like smooth whiskey. Like that's really nice. And that's the point is, at some point if they're done right, there should be a lot of parallels and a lot of similarities. So it's nice to share this with someone who appreciates it. Cool deal.
Well, thank you so much again. Casa Noble.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Drinks in a Movie podcast. You can now find us on Instagram at Drinks in a Movie Pod, where we'll be posting photos from all the various films that we discuss. You can also email us at drinksinamoviepod@gmail.com. Please rate, review, and subscribe, and thank you for listening.